Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. This, Andy, out of all the choices that we have and the 16 losses the Lakers have faced, this one, Tuesday to the Celtics, is the worst. The worst. We'll explain next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free. It's never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the show, generally speaking, a little early. And then you get to see us and you get to participate. This is the most important thing in a great Lakers community that is growing as the channel grows. Lots of comments, everybody talking to each other, talking to us. And it'll be a vibrant place, if not angry, on Wednesday.
Anger is vibrance, Brian.
Yes, that's true. It is a form of vibrant. 122-118 is the final score. Lakers lose in overtime to the Boston Celtics. I said it in the open. Got a lot of games to choose from. 16 of them for the worst loss of the season. Some of them are pretty bad. That Sacramento game, that was pretty bad. Indiana game, that was pretty bad. Philly, pretty bad. This one to me was the worst. I don't know if you agree. This one was the worst. You are, against the Celtics, come back from 20, go up by 13. You're playing 46 minutes for AD or 44 or 43 or whatever, 46 for AD, 43 for LeBron. These guys play the entire second half and through the overtime, and you lose. Got nothing to show for it.
It may be the worst. I'm not going to argue with anybody who says it's the worst. To me, among the many reasons, that it could be the worst, just obviously they need wins. You had this thing sitting pretty, if not, it wasn't gift wrapped in the sense that the bow was completely tied, but the gift was in the present. The present was wrapped, and you had the wrapping paper tied around the box and like one loop prepared, but they hadn't just completely tied the whole thing, I guess. And I guess the ribbon was really, really loose with that bow. But if you want to point to one reason why this loss really, really stings, it's that you had the opportunity to really make a statement about the team that you feel like you can turn into, because you can point to wins over Milwaukee and Boston, arguably the two best teams in the league. And maybe you can't say from there, we are as good as them, because, what do they call it? Transference or whatever, the power of transference. Like, it doesn't go apples to apples like that. But you have definitive proof we can hang
with anybody,
with the two best teams in the league, and we can beat the two best teams in the league. Now all you can say is we can definitely give the two best teams in the league a fight. But there's a big, big difference, man. Big difference.
You talk about like the game being wrapped up and ready to go. Like the Philly game, for example, that was a present that was given to them. That was one where like the Sixers said, look, the Lakers couldn't quit on the game and they had to keep playing on the. The Sixers were the ones who gift wrapped that game for the Lakers. The Lakers, no, please.
Treated it like a white elf in exchange.
You keep it. We don't want that. You keep that. It was sweet. We appreciate it. Spirit of holidays and all that. You guys hold on to that. Thank you. We're going to be kind guests and visitors.
We don't celebrate holidays with this team.
No. They earned this one. They earned this comeback. They were down 20. I'm not saying they weren't problems that, you don't want to fall down by 20, which is something Darvin Ham talked about, the team talked about, and we're going to talk about because there are some things that go into that. but like they were down 20 against the best team in the league in the third quarter. And they turned that into a 13-point lead with 4.5 minutes to go. And that was because they played their asses off. They did that defensively. They cranked it up. They made shots. Anthony Davis was there. LeBron played, I think, arguably his best game of the year. 33 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, a block, 2 steals, 14 of 25. The only thing you'd want to see is a higher 3-point percentage. He's only 3 of 11 from 3. But I saw people, whether it's social media or some of the questions or the posts, this game framed as the Lakers fell short in their comeback. No, they did not. The Lakers blew a 13-point lead with 4.5 minutes to go. At some point, your comeback becomes a game that you were up by whatever it was, 13, where you blew the lead, where it wasn't about the comeback. They had the comeback. They were up by 13. They blew the lead. That's what this is about. And Andy, we now have pretty definitive evidence. They cannot close games. They can't, of every type. They've talked about Sacramento, talked about Indiana, talked about Philly, talked about this one. Whether the game is gift wrap for them, whether they blow their own lead, whatever it is, no matter, they cannot close games. They are one Matt Ryan miracle shot away from not winning any of these.
Look, man, you could even make the argument that the road trip closing win over Detroit, they had some issues closing that game.
They absolutely did.
And that is, due respect to a Pistons team that really does play extremely hard. And I guess I've heard a couple of people say you could argue they are better than their record. They ain't that much better. And the Lakers had difficulty closing them out. As great as Anthony Davis was in this game, as great as he has
I can't believe it's taken 8 minutes for us to get to this part.
Season, the dude has struggled at the line in money time late in the fourth quarter. And it really sucks to bring this up because, my God, that guy is playing his ass off. He played the entire second half. He played all of overtime. You cannot complain about, forget just the effort. You can't complain about the production. You cannot complain about what he is providing on both ends. Playing at this level,
37
season,
points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, a steal, 13 of 24 from the field, 11 of 15 from the free throw line, which is not bad, except as you're talking about, Andy.
And this has become a thing. I also couldn't help but think about, too.
For people, by the way, for people who may not have seen it, we're referring to AD at the line with the Lakers up to, I think it was 28 seconds left in the game. So it wouldn't have completely iced it for the Lakers, but obviously you make those free throws, you go up by 4. He missed both and left the door open for Jason Tatum to tie the game.
And, I also couldn't help but think about, in this game specifically, but maybe it's something that you think about with just close games. Certainly, what we saw with Philadelphia in overtime. As great as AD has been all season, and, I agree with you, on balance, this was a strong game for LeBron. Mm-hmm. LeBron is closing in on 38, and Anthony Davis, while only 29, is a big man. Big men get tired quicker. Seeing this, up against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, both younger, both wings, it makes you think a little bit even more about just the age and construction of this team and maybe how that can occasionally come to bite the team in certain situations.
Well, let's talk about that next, because that gets into both the construction, literally who is on the team. I saw an interesting comment this week about the nature of the roster construction and why Darvin plays some of the lineups that he does. But you also asked a question at the beginning of the show. What do you do with this? They're 11-16, but playing better. Does it make you more likely to make a trade, less likely to make a trade? The Magic December 15th, landmark, whatever, is coming quick. The options will be there. Tons of questions to ask. We'll get to it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Turo, the world's largest sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want wherever you want it from a community of local hosts across the US, UK, Canada, and coming soon to Australia. You can drive around with Andrew Bogut. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget. Book an SUV or minivan for a family road trip, a pickup truck for bulky errands, even test drive a new electric vehicle that you've had your eye on, but you want to see, does this fit into my everyday lifestyle, or just an affordable economy car? If you're on a budget and just need to get from point A to point B, because sometimes you just got to drive somewhere. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Turo.com. Real quick, Brian, before we get to the point that you were going...
These questions. I've got questions.
Yes, these questions from our buddy Dave McMenamin at ESPN. A tweet after this overtime loss. Illuminating tidbit from @StatsWilliams, someone who does stats for ESPN, on the brutal feeling Laker fans will leave with tonight. It was the second time the Lakers blew a double-digit lead with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter of the season. The rest of the NBA has done that twice combined this season.
It just means the Lakers are that much better than the rest of the league.
I mean,
but it's, you know, and Cranjus McBasketball, Tim _NBA, our friend from the Lakers Exceptionalism Pod, was noting a lot of this on Twitter. And like, he breaks down film and what they're running and all that kind of stuff, and had a lot of criticisms for the coaching staff that they just stop running plays late in games. Like a lot of teams sometimes do that.
It's not a Laker exclusive thing.
No, but for this team, they're getting better at scoring. And you know, the supporting cast is flawed in terms of getting them go. Like, but you have Anthony Davis and LeBron James on your team. You ought to be able to close out at least some of these games, whether that means hitting a free throw. And again, it's 2 games now in a week that Anthony Davis has missed the opportunity to put the Lakers, in the case of Philly, to win the game. And in the case of the game on Tuesday, 4-point lead with 28 seconds to go. Can't say it's going to win the game, but you're a whole lot better off than up by 2. They ought to be able to. It's coaching, it's lineups, it's roster construction, it's all of these things, but they have a real problem closing games, and they need to fix it, and they need to fix it fast. You asked the question at the beginning of the show, what do you do from here? Again, December 15th, that's the day that the NBA opens up trade possibilities for players who were signed in the off season. Like, that opens up, another 15-20% of the league, guys who can be traded, all kinds of arcane rules, including, when you signed your contract and how
a lot of guys who specifically too could match a Patrick Beverly sized salary.
Right. And, it gives the Lakers more options about who it's not just Russell Westbrook. It's other, blah, 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 blah. We don't need to get into the arcane rules of the NBA collective bargaining agreement, but trying to figure out what you do here is complex. Like, we just saw Bogdanovich throttle the Lakers, and you want to talk about a guy who would solve a lot of problems for this team. A player like Bojan Bogdanovich, who can run off screens, who you have to respect in a great way offensively, becomes a much more reliable and consistent third type scorer than Russell Westbrook. Like, you do not want Westbrook in that role. He was third scorer tonight for the Lakers, 20 points, but that's not where you want Russ to be. Like, Bogdanovich makes a ton of sense, but what do you give up for that? You're going to have to give up at least first. Do you give up 2? Do you give up, how much protection do you have? Lakers are going to have a lot of company going for Bogdanovich. How much do you try to rescue a team that's 11-16, but clearly can play with anybody? But if they don't get out of this month, at least as 3 or 4 games under 500, I don't care how good they are. Like you can't climb out of 8 or 9 games under 500 after the first of the year. It just
Well,
doesn't happen in this league.
Here's the thing. You might be able to climb out of that, but the real odds are stacked against becoming a team from that position that can make real playoff noise. And, if you deem it worth it enough, and, I'm sure we're going to get into more of the trade stuff for Thursday's show, when everything kicks, more stuff kicks off, I should say. The floodgates aren't entirely
And there's
open,
another deadline January 15th for a different set of guys.
Yeah.
Like this happens more than once.
But, we've talked about this earlier in the season, like the idea of what the threshold for trades, is. Like, I have felt like if you can become legitimately competitive, that can be a legitimate baseline, because the Lakers just don't have an easy, obvious foundation to be one of the elite teams right now. Even with AD playing at this level, there's still a lot to fill around. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the odds are stacked against it. So I don't think that's the proper baseline to begin with. But however you define that baseline, to your point, the further that you go, at minimum running in place, at worst digging the hole incrementally deeper, the less you might start thinking a trade of any kind, asset forfeiture of any kind is worth it. And then you will start having some fans upset about the idea of self-fulfilling prophecies, to say nothing
And
of
particularly
LeBron and AD upset at self-fulfilling prophecies.
And it's particularly true of when you're talking about like trades that would be good deals, but aren't blockbusters. And there's only so much blockbuster you can do with this team, given what they have available to them. But the I would say the highest profile type trade is still Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. Again, I don't think that's a deal that necessarily can be made today because Indiana's too competitive. But something along those lines. What the other part of it, and this is another thing that is distressing about a game like Tuesday, is you mentioned it, Andy. You've got a Anthony Davis, a big, has a history of injury trouble, and whatever, and you're playing him 46 minutes. You have 38-year-old LeBron James playing him 43 minutes. Why? Because you need to win this game. You got a chance to win a game against a really good team, steal one back, build some. I'm not blaming Darvin for playing those guys those minutes, but you damn well better win the game.
Yeah.
That's like there is a cost to playing LeBron 43 minutes in a game that you lose. It is.
Yeah.
I can't quantify it. I don't know exactly what it is, but it exists. And the Lakers paid that toll tonight and did not win the game.
They are recognizing what is potentially slipping away. And however good they think they are, they're not meeting that moment. You saw it with LeBron after the game. He was asked, and it's not the first time he's been asked, and to be fair to the people asking, it's often coming off comments where Darvin Ham has said that he's proud of the team for competing. The idea of what does it say about this team that they are fighting back, that they are playing at times toe-to-toe at this level of competition. LeBron shut down entirely, rather emphatically, the whole almost one big picture narrative. He said, you're talking to the wrong guy talking about almost winning. Like, that was, I believe, his exact quote. Like, he's not having this. And it's not the first time he's not had it. He's like, what's the takeaway? We lost. Like, yeah, you can go into the film room. You can look at different things to do better. There's obviously things we can execute better. There's obviously, a broad confidence that we have about this team, but we had it anyway. We just lost.
Yeah.
And the idea of, big picture, I don't even want to say moral victories, but just the idea of big picture comfort, 5,000 foot comfort. Darvin may believe this. He may just be saying it because he doesn't want to put his team on blast after they did fight for an overtime loss. But I can tell
Right,
you, these
and you can't, and you also don't want to you don't want to start using language that makes it sound like the season's over.
right.
You're like,
But I can tell you right now, like LeBron, he ain't having it. I don't think AD's having it. I don't think Russell Westbrook's having it. I don't think this team is having it.
yeah, I agree with you. Well, a couple more things I want to say about that, and then there is something that Darvin said as well about the comebacks and the nature of these comebacks that we need to discuss. Because I know it's something that's been sticking in your craw, Andy Kamenetsky, for a little while now. That's right. Craw talk next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, and esports. They got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which you obviously do, you're listening to one right now, you can find those at BetOnline as well. Content is king over at BetOnline. Always the fastest, easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. Bet online where the game starts.
So in this question to LeBron, you are correct. Like these are things that Darvin says. Ask the players about it, and then move on from there. Dan Wojcicki, who is just a great writer with the LA Times, great beat
friend
reporter,
of the show,
friend of the show, and has a fantastic story profile of Darvin in the LA Times. You got to go read. We'll tweet it out.
It's really good.
We have to, regardless of what you think of Darvin's lineup choices, like this story, and it's fantastic. The way Dan was asking the question, LeBron was so, I think, annoyed at the concept of moral victories even being presented as an option. He cut him off halfway through. But the way Dan was setting up the question, I was wondering if he was going to say, do these comebacks say, there's been a bunch of games that you have, the fighting spirit or whatever it is, or that you can't close. You guys have a problem, closing games, or the roster's not where it needs to be. Like it felt to me when he asked that question that there was an or there coming.
Maybe.
Don't know. I wasn't in the room. It certainly was where my mind was going. And I'd love to know LeBron's answer to that one too, because what he thinks about this group and the potential of it, and who ought to be playing and who shouldn't be, regardless of how we got here, the relitigating the Westbrook deal or whatever, here we are. I would love to know what he thinks about their prospects as a group being this reliant on him and AD to be bananas good all the time. Like they have to be excellent all the time. And at 38, that is a tall order even for LeBron, who is put together some pretty good games in his last 7 or 8, but it's a lot. I'd love to know what he thinks about the other part of at least my hypothetical question to him.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the lack of execution down the stretch. During the TNT broadcast, Boston's last possession in regulation, Jason Tatum hit a very difficult shot over LeBron.
44 points for Tatum. He was excellent.
We talked about this with John Corrales, Locked On Celtics, in our preview of this game. I said this in a recent Spectrum Sportsnet appearance. I think you can make an argument that Jason Tatum, beyond clearly playing at an MVP level, you could argue he's the front runner this season. He may be the most well-rounded player in the game right now, just in terms of there's nothing you can really point at and say, dude can't do that at least reasonably well. But Reggie Miller during the broadcast, and I think, I'm not trying to pick on Reggie Miller. I actually, on balance, enjoy him as a broadcaster.
I like Reggie gets a lot of flack from fans. I like him, and I'll tell you why. He is wildly enthusiastic about watching basketball on TV.
And I agree with that. And I think for the most part, that makes him very entertaining. But this particular moment, I think he got caught up in enthusiasm. And after that shot, it's a Lakers' final possession of regulation. Reggie Miller said, if I'm LeBron, I go right back at
I
Jason
heard that.
Tatum.
Yes.
Because what's the worst thing that can happen? Go to overtime. And we saw the worst that could happen. James Worthy during the post-game analysis on Spectrum Sportsnet said, could have gotten a better shot than that. I'm more on Team Worthy than Team Miller.
Yeah, no question. And the Lakers, look, to their credit, they only scored 2 points in overtime against Philly. They got 8
Right.
against Boston, so that's better.
The further you go into this game, like deep into the fourth or into overtime,
they were cooked.
Well, they were cooked, and you started seeing, I think at least, I rewound these a few times, what seemed to be defensive mistakes by AD and LeBron. And these were not mistakes of either, indifference, losing focus. Well, I think these were mistakes of they're fried. Like those guys.
Yeah, AD was, they had, in my estimation, this is scientific, about a 3% chance of winning in overtime. Because when you combine the effort it took to get there with, AD was clearly fried at the end of the game. LeBron was clearly tired. And the emotional letdown of, oh, by the way, blowing a 13-point lead with 4.5 minutes to go. And missing free throws that could have won they had no chance of winning in overtime.
It's funny because in overtime of their extensive big three, Russell Westbrook was the only one that seemed like he still had some legs and still was playing with the energy you need in overtime. But the problem is, due respect to Russ, and a couple bad shots notwithstanding, I don't think he played badly in overtime. Russ is not good enough to be the takeover guy in overtime against the Celtics.
You're not going to get efficient scoring opportunities. Those are shots Boston will be more than happy to let the Lakers take. And
look, Russ was actually, his scoring was efficient in overtime, but it's still, you don't want him being the guy. The Lakers had 10 shots in overtime. Russ took 6. Even if he's shooting efficiently, which he did, he made 3 of them. That's not ideal, but to be fair to everybody involved, Russ was the best scorer they had that I think wasn't completely on E at that point, on empty.
Yeah. We'll have to take a different show to talk about how well is Westbrook playing? Because it's like everything with Russ. It's like certain things there's like no middle ground. It's all either kind of like really good or really not. But anyway, I want to start this conversation because, and it will take us through into
Thursday's show.
Thursday's show into Friday, probably even too, as we get ready for the Denver game. That's another kind of semi must win against a really good team.
You ain't kidding.
This is the problem. You start off 2-10. This is the problem. People are tired of us calling every game a must win. Sorry. So the other thing that Darvin said was they use up a ton of energy. He basically sort of said, well, look, we were fried in the overtime. We didn't have much of a chance to do the best we could, blah, blah, blah. Part of the problem is we use up too much energy trying to make comebacks after falling behind. In this game, the Lakers were down 13 at the end of the first quarter. They are 23rd in the league going into this game in terms of point differential in the first quarter. They routinely fall behind, which is part of the reason their second quarters are just so darn good. That's their only quarter where they're above water.
They're a terrible third quarter team too.
And they're not a great fourth quarter team. Again, second quarter is the only one where they're above water.
As bad as they've had with closing, they are better in the fourth than they are in the third.
So
first and third are their worst quarters by a pretty wide margin.
I'm wondering if you think, Andy, that there's an element that might be at least a partial explanation for these things.
We can get into more of, there's a lot of details in this and some numbers we've found and stuff like that. Darvin Ham needs to change the starting lineup. He specifically needs to take Patrick Beverley out of the starting lineup. I'm not saying Patrick Beverley needs to be out of the rotation altogether, but there is a lot, I think, that specifically comes from Beverley, even if Patrick Beverley, I want to make it clear, is not the quote-unquote only problem. Like, it's not all him, but I think there is a very direct trickle-down effect that we can talk about in Thursday's show that I think is very specific to Beverley in that starting lineup that creates a lot of issues that lead to the Lakers spending a lot of energy trying to paper over bad starts to the first quarter, bad starts to the third quarter. And I think, and whatever reasons, we can speculate some of them, why Darvin is insisting on this lineup and specifically Beverley in it. I don't think you can nearly come up with as many reasons why he would than why you wouldn't take Beverley out. And I think it's a real problem.
And let's pick up Thursday's show with that, because there's a lot goes into it, a lot of combinations, a lot of things about the way the roster is constructed that go back to some of the things we were talking about this show. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you go to see us be visibly frustrated by things like a 122-118 loss to the Boston Celtics on Tuesday. God, please stop doing this, Lakers. This one really was bad and stings and made me angry. All right, we'll see everybody Thursday.